A pregnant black woman was dragged into the basement simply for showing up to a prenatal checkup alone. She didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She just placed a hand on her belly, gently shielding the life growing inside her. As two security guards pulled her away, as if she'd committed some unspeakable crime. Her only crime? Walking into an upscale women's clinic, on time, alone, with a tired but kind face, and without a man by her side. A white doctor stepped out, glanced her up and down, then coldly announced. The Cartier watch on her desk had gone missing. No evidence, no security footage checked, just one suspicious look. And a black woman instantly became the suspect. She was dragged out of the clinic, her phone confiscated, her dignity torn apart, while everyone else looked away in silence. But there was one thing they didn't know. The husband they refused to let her call. He wasn't someone who looked the other way. He wasn't someone who bowed his head. He was the deputy director of the Federal Civil Rights Division, and he was already on his way to that building. When he walked in, he didn't have to raise his voice. The truth alone was enough to shake the entire system. Early morning in Atlanta. Soft golden sunlight filtered through the trees. The sidewalks looked pressed and polished, and the breeze carried a faint scent of jasmine from somewhere unseen. Everything felt so peaceful. It almost seemed fake. At the corner of Juniper and Pontoleon stood a building like a monument to luxury. Eastbrook Women's Medical Center, its mirrored glass gleaming like silver, white marble pristine and flawless, orchids arranged in crystal vases, not a single petal out of place. Inside, leather chairs sat in perfect silence. The AC hummed with precision, and the kind of expensive stillness that made people forget who they really were. Danielle Carter stood at the glass doors, one hand resting gently on her 6-month belly. Her light blue maternity dress, far from designer, fit her figure with quiet grace. Her brown skin glowed in the early light, her face calm, her eyes filled with quiet anticipation. She stepped in with courtesy and hope, but no one smiled back. A white couple walked past without so much as a glance. The receptionist looked up for half a second, then lowered her gaze, as if Danielle's presence was a flaw in this flawless space. And that was just the beginning. Danielle Carter wasn't the kind of woman people write tributes about. She didn't wear designer clothes. She didn't have a bodyguard by her side. Just a faded canvas tote, a folder of ultrasound scans, and a heart that had learned how to be strong, in silence. 6 months pregnant. She walked slowly into the clinic's lobby, one hand supporting her back, the other gently gliding across her belly, as if whispering to the child inside, "We're going to be okay, baby. Daddy's coming." Today was her first 4D ultrasound. Ethan, her husband, was supposed to be there. He always was. But this morning, he'd been called away suddenly by the federal office. He had texted, "I'll get there as soon as I can." And she believed him, because Ethan always kept his word. But in a place filled with the scent of artificial lavender and the clicking of heels on polished stone, every passing minute stretched like a breath held too long. She sat down, quietly. The other women exchanged glances. One pulled her purse closer. An older man lowered his gaze, as if afraid to meet a mirror he wasn't ready to face. And in the middle of that gleaming silence, Danielle stood out like a low note in a flawless melody. Soft enough to be dismissed, strong enough to make the entire system rethink itself. The clinic door closed softly behind her. Danielle sat down, gently adjusting her dress so it wouldn't wrinkle over her growing belly. She heard the rustling of papers, the rhythmic beep of a heart monitor, but not a single word of greeting. Then the door opened. A white woman stepped in. Crisp white coat, hair tied in a tight bun, eyes colder than the room's AC, Dr. Lindsay Halbert. No handshake, no good morning, no eye contact, just a quick scan from head to toe, like someone inspecting a package that must have been delivered to the wrong address. So, you're Danielle Carter? The tone wasn't a question. It was a judgment wrapped in suspicion. Danielle tried to remain polite. Yes, I'm here for the 4D ultrasound. Halbert's lips curled, not bothering to hide the disdain. Alone? No one came with you? Let me guess. You don't know who the father is, or he decided to vanish this morning. The air turned thick. Danielle froze. Her heart raced, but she didn't look away. Halbert walked over to the desk, shuffling papers like she was clearing trash, then added one more cut. This is a high-end medical facility, not a bus station. We serve people who care about their children's future, and not first time, whoever Danielle understood. She hadn't come for a checkup. She had walked straight into a war zone. Danielle stood up, slowly, but firmly. Her gaze held steady. Her chin lifted slightly, one hand resting gently on her belly, as if to remind herself. She wasn't standing up just for her, but for her child. I'm sorry, but I don't deserve to be treated like this, she said. Her voice trembled ever so slightly, but it didn't waver. I arrived on time. I've been respectful. I don't have to accept this kind of disrespect from anyone. Dr. Halbert paused, but not out of remorse. She turned toward her desk, pretending to search for something. Then she spun back around, her eyes sharp, like she'd just cued the next act in a performance she'd rehearsed before. Well, how convenient, she sneered. My Cartier watch, platinum case, white gold band, was sitting right here this morning. Now it's gone. Silence. Then that look, piercing through Danielle like a sentence already passed. No jury, no defense. Maybe you walked in with something that doesn't belong to you. Danielle froze. This wasn't subtext anymore. This wasn't disdain hidden behind politeness. This was a direct blow, a calculated accusation. In just seconds, she was no longer a patient, no longer a woman, no longer a mother-to-be. She had become a suspect, on trial in a courtroom, without rules, without counsel, where prejudice was judge, jury, and executioner. The door clicked shut behind Dr. Halbert. Danielle stood alone in the freezing room, the sharp sting of disinfectant choking the air. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled, but her legs held steady. She reached for her phone. Ethan, I need you. She hadn't even dialed, when footsteps thundered down the hall, heavy, purposeful. 2 security guards appeared, one older, drained, indifferent, one younger, bigger, chewing gum with a sneer in his eyes. Ms. Carter, we've received a report from Dr. Halbert. Personal property is missing. You'll need to come with us. Danielle stepped back. I didn't take anything. I'm pregnant. I have the right to call my husband. The younger guard snatched the phone from her hand, powered it off, and tossed it into a drawer. You'll get your call, once the investigation's done. They escorted her through a side hallway. No patients, no windows, no light. Just locked doors, and the smell of bleach. A small room emerged. Gray walls, flickering fluorescent light, plastic chair bolted to the floor. The camera, dead. No questions, no lawyer, no evidence. Danielle sat there, 6 months pregnant, like a criminal, sentenced by nothing more than the wrong look from the right person at the wrong time. And the world outside stayed quiet, as if nothing had happened at all. Danielle sat there, alone, surrounded by 4 gray walls, under a flickering fluorescent light that pulsed like a heart out of rhythm. She wasn't tied down. No one was shouting at her. But the feeling of being imprisoned was as real as a hand tightening around her throat. Her heart pounded. Tension pushed blood to her temples. And then she felt it. A soft kick from inside. The baby. Her child was feeling something too. A wave of unease adults spend their lives pretending doesn't exist. Danielle closed her eyes, took a long, deep breath, counted each inhale like bricks in a wall, a barrier to keep her grounded. Then she opened her eyes, slowly, lifted her chin and looked straight at the two men guarding the door, as if they were the ones lost, not her. "I came here to take care of my child," she said, voice steady now. "I haven't done anything wrong. You have no right to do this." No one answered, only the sound of chewing gum, loud, slow, indifferent. But something in Danielle's eyes had shifted. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a mother, preparing for a battle no one had ever taught her how to fight. The glass doors slid open. Black leather shoes met the marble floor, each step echoing like a countdown. Ethan Carter, charcoal suit tailored like armor, tie perfectly knotted. The Department of Justice, Civil Rights Division badge gleaming on his lapel. He didn't glance around, didn't ask for directions, because anyone who tried to stand in his way would immediately know they shouldn't. Ethan walked straight to the front desk. The blonde receptionist behind the monitor looked up, and for the first time that day, her expression changed. "My wife, Danielle Carter, had a 10:30 appointment with Dr. Halbert. Where is she?" His voice was low, measured, but edged with steel. Just sharp enough to make it clear. This wasn't a conversation. It was a command. There was an incident. Security is currently. Take me to her." Ethan cut in. "Or get someone with the authority to do it." He reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim leather wallet, and flipped it open. A federal ID. Nothing flashy. It didn't need to be. Its presence alone was enough for the entire Eastbrook Medical Center to realize the storm they started was now at the door. The metal door swung open. The two security guards inside looked up, confused, tense. Danielle sat upright, one hand on her belly, her eyes widening the moment she saw her husband step in. Ethan didn't ask a thing. He simply walked to her, placed a hand gently on her shoulder. A touch that said, "I'm here. You're not alone." Then he turned. His voice was low, steady, but powerful enough to tear through any excuse. "I'm demanding, immediately, the name of whoever authorized my wife's detainment, a full incident report, and all security footage from the moment she entered this building." One of the guards stammered. "We were just following protocol. There was a report of a missing item." "Your protocol does not override the Constitution," Ethan snapped, pulling out his DOJ badge and holding it squarely under the fluorescent light. "I am now exercising federal civil rights intervention. Delay me one more minute, and you'll both be under investigation for obstructing justice." The room froze. A monitor flickered on. Footage began to rewind, frame by frame. Danielle walking in, polite, silent, not touching anything but the back of a chair. Then, Dr. Halbert appears, glances toward the desk. And there it is. The platinum Cartier watch, sitting untouched, right next to the tissue box. Ethan pointed. "Zoom in, freeze it." The watch had never moved. And with a single press of a button, the entire fabrication collapsed in silence. Ethan stood tall, his eyes sweeping across the two security guards, frozen like statues. Danielle remained seated behind him, silent, but her gaze was changing. No longer the look of someone wounded, but of someone finally, truly protected. "I'm going to say this once," Ethan began, his voice sharp, like a silver-edged blade. You detained my wife, a pregnant woman, with no evidence, no statement of rights, no access to her phone. He paused, then spoke slowly, deliberately. That is unlawful detainment, a violation of federal civil rights, and in a medical context, a denial of health care and a serious breach of clinical ethics. No one argued. There was nothing left to defend. Ethan reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim stack of papers. This is an official notice. I am demanding the following: a public report detailing the full incident, immediate disciplinary action against Dr. Lindsay Halbert, and the initiation of an internal reform program addressing racial bias, including mandatory staff retraining. Then he looked straight up into the ceiling camera. And if we don't receive a formal response within 48 hours, this case goes public and straight to federal court. Each word, each syllable, never raised in volume, but powerful enough to make an entire system fall. Silent. And listen. The older security guard's hands trembled as he opened the drawer. Danielle's phone lay inside. Cold, stripped from her grip, like her dignity had been torn from her palms. He placed it on the table, saying nothing. Ethan picked it up, gently wiped it with his sleeve, then handed it back to his wife with both hands, as if returning a stolen piece of her freedom. Danielle took it, but didn't turn it on right away. She looked at her husband, eyes glassy but proud. And then, suddenly, the tears came. Not from fear, but from release. Because for the first time, after too many times staying silent, she had been defended, out loud. No more, stay calm. No more, just let it go. She wept in the middle of that sterile, indifferent room. And in that single, raw moment, the space became more human than any apology could ever make it. Ethan said nothing. He just held her hand. And in that silence, a new truth took shape. This was no longer just a woman who came in for a prenatal checkup. This was a living witness. A reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come with the bang of a gavel, but with the right hand held at the right time. The elevator doors opened. Ethan stepped out first, his charcoal suit cutting through the stifling air like a blade. Danielle followed, each step slow, graceful, but steady as stone. No more wary glances, no more whispered clutches of handbags. Only silence. The kind reserved for those who had completely misjudged the person standing before them. She didn't lift her chin too high. She didn't need to. Just kept her head level, her back straight, her gaze focused, like the seam down her maternity dress. A manager in a blue shirt stood waiting outside a glass-walled conference room, clipboard trembling in his hands. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, the board is ready. Dr. Halbert is inside. Ethan nodded. No pleasantries needed. Danielle walked past the manager. Not fast, not slow. And as the door opened, the entire room held its breath. Not because for the first time, they were seeing a pregnant black woman who had been humiliated now enter the room with the poise of someone no longer afraid. And from that moment forward, the world could never go back to the way it was. Inside the glass-walled conference room, white overhead lights poured down onto a long, cold conference table. 3 members of the ethics board, 2 men, 1 woman, all white, flipped through paperwork but couldn't mask the tension on their faces. At the far end, Dr. Lindsay Halbert sat with her arms crossed. Her eyes tried to appear composed, but the tight line of her lips betrayed her defense. Ethan didn't sit. He remained standing, opened a folder, and laid out a timeline. Security camera stills, transcripts of dialogue. My wife was falsely accused, unlawfully detained, and denied access to medical care in the middle of her pregnancy. simply because she didn't fit the profile this facility expects from its patients. No one objected. No one could. Danielle lifted her head. She looked directly at the woman who had humiliated her. No trembling, no rage, only truth. "You looked at me, and all you saw was a problem," she said, her voice slow, but ringing like metal striking stone. "Not a teacher, not a wife, not a mother. You didn't see a human being, just an inconvenience." Dr. Halbert opened her mouth, then closed it. Because some trials, even without a judge, still deliver a silence so full of truth that the guilty have nothing left to say. The air in the room was thick. No one moved, not a single cough. Ethan placed the final folder on the table. His voice didn't rise, but every word fell like a hammer onto the brittle frame of a broken institution. "I'm not standing here just because my wife was insulted. I'm standing here because countless other women of color will continue to walk into this building and be seen through the same lens you all just witnessed on that footage." He paused, turned to the board, and spoke, clearly, deliberately. "We are demanding the following, in writing, within 72 hours. 1. A public apology issued to Danielle Carter and to every community affected by this incident. 2. The immediate suspension of Dr. Lindsay Halbert from all clinical duties, pending an independent investigation by the State Medical Review Board. 3. The launch of an internal reform initiative, including mandatory training on unconscious bias, medical ethics, and racial equity, with oversight from an external civil rights organization. No one objected, only nods, each deeper than the last, as Ethan held their gaze, because in that room they no longer saw a patient's husband. They were looking at the voice of a tidal shift already on its way. 3 days later, Eastbrook Medical Center issued a public statement across all platforms. The first line read, "We apologize to Danielle Carter, and we apologize to everyone who has ever been silenced by bias." The statement was shared with local media, posted on the clinic's homepage, and printed out, distributed to every staff member, by hand. Dr. Lindsay Halbert, once seated silently behind the exam table, was officially suspended indefinitely. An independent investigation was launched. An emergency seminar on racial bias in medical care was scheduled without delay. But most important of all was a letter, handwritten, from the chief executive officer, sent directly to Danielle, not to excuse, but to acknowledge. "We cannot imagine what it felt like to be treated that way. But because of your courage, we've been forced to confront who we are and to change." Danielle didn't respond right away. She just sat in her living room, hand resting on her belly, where her child stirred softly, as if tapping to the rhythm of a new kind of life. She wasn't just apologized to. She was seen. And sometimes, in a world where your very existence is constantly questioned, being truly seen, with the heart, is the first step toward reclaiming your freedom. Sunday morning, outside the main entrance of Eastbrook Women's Medical Center, the place that once rejected her, a podium now stood. Behind it, a sea of people, journalists, civil rights organizations, Black mothers, and those who had once stayed silent, now gathered to listen. Danielle Carter stepped up to the microphone. No high heels, no crown, just simple flats, a modest maternity dress, and eyes that had seen what no camera could ever capture. The pain of being treated as invisible. She didn't look at notes. She looked forward. And then she spoke, softly, like a confession. But each word hit the ground like thunder. "This isn't just my story. It's the story of millions of Black women who have walked into a room and been seen as a burden, a mistake, an exception. We're not asking for privilege. We're asking to exist, without needing permission. Below the stage, Ethan stood quietly, his hand clasped tightly in hers. No slogans, no grand closing remarks, because sometimes one woman standing tall